Welcome back to another episode of Train for Life Fitness Podcast. I am really thrilled to have you joining us today for this deep dive.
Yeah, it is great to be here.
So I want you to picture a scenario, and I can almost guarantee you've lived through this exact moment. You're completely dialed into your fitness routine at home, right?
Right.
Your macros are tracked, your training splits are optimized, your sleep hygiene is, totally on point.
You feel physically and mentally resilient, invincible, basically.
Exactly. But then reality hits. You have to pack a suitcase.
Oh, yeah, the suitcase.
Right. Maybe it's a frantic 3-day business trip with back-to-back client dinners.
Yeah.
Or perhaps a cross-country flight for a family vacation. So you meticulously pack your trainers, you roll up your favorite moisture-wicking gear.
Bricks in the carry-on.
Yep. And you make this silent vow to yourself that you're going to stay on track. But fast forward 72 hours. The shoes haven't even moved from the bottom of your bag. Your central nervous system is totally fried from the travel stress, and you are sustaining yourself on, airport terminal pastries.
And that carefully periodized routine has completely disintegrated.
It's a wildly frustrating, almost universal experience for anyone who trains regularly.
It really is. And the psychological fallout from that scenario is often worse than the actual physical detraining.
Yeah.
You end up dealing with this compounding cycle of guilt and systemic stress right when you're supposed to be, performing at a high level for work or theoretically relaxing on a holiday.
Which is exactly why the source material we're looking at today caught our attention. We're analyzing a highly practical, stripped-down guide titled How to Stay Fit While Traveling or on the Road.
It's a great protocol.
It was put together by the fitness brand Lët'z. You might actually be familiar with them. They use that really distinctive geometric lion logo. But it's worth noting up front that while this comes from a commercial brand, the guide itself completely bypasses the usual marketing fluff.
It does. It reads much more like a tactical manual. It's remarkably concise, which is appropriate given the subject matter. When you're traveling, the last thing you need is a convoluted 80-page textbook on biomechanics. You need a highly actionable set of heuristics.
And our mission for this deep dive is to extract those exact heuristics. We want to isolate the real-life, stress-tested strategies from this guide that will help you stay active, manage your nutrition, and regulate your physical state while living out of a suitcase.
Without needing a fully equipped commercial gym.
Right, and without demanding miserable perfectionist meal prep. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with what the guide identifies as the initial point of failure for most travelers. And surprisingly, it isn't a lack of access to a squat rack or a busy itinerary. The primary hurdle is entirely cognitive. It's your mindset.
What's fascinating here is how the guide pinpoints the specific psychological trap that trips up almost everyone who takes their training seriously. It's that pervasive all-or-nothing mentality.
Yes, the all-or-nothing trap.
We tend to operate under the assumption that if we cannot execute our fully programmed 90-minute hypertrophy session exactly as we do it in our home gym, then the entire endeavor is a wash.
Which is crazy when you think about it.
Right, and the source explicitly attacks this fallacy by demanding a total perspective shift. When you are on the road, the objective is no longer about progress. You are not trying to force an overtaxed body to hit new personal records.
I'd even argue that trying to hit a PR after a 6-hour flight is a massive recipe for an injury anyway. Your sleep architecture is usually compromised. Your hydration is way off.
The ambient pressure changes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yet people still feel genuinely guilty that they aren't adding weight to the bar in some cramped, unventilated hotel gym.
It is biologically counterproductive. The guide advocates shifting the goalpost entirely from progress to maintenance. The focus becomes solely about preserving momentum and mitigating the negative physiological impacts of travel.
Because if we look at the actual benefits of on-the-go fitness that the text outlines, they're entirely functional. Staying active while traveling is used to keep your baseline energy levels stable.
It's a tool to actively clear cortisol and reduce the systemic stress of jet lag.
It supports mental clarity and regulates your mood. So we're no longer talking about muscle cross-sectional area or vanity metrics here. We are talking about autonomic nervous system regulation.
You are essentially using movement to survive the trip, not to prepare for a bodybuilding stage.
That reframing is so crucial, and it leads directly into a rule the guide establishes that feels almost antithetical to standard fitness industry rhetoric, which is active forgiveness.
Such an important concept.
The text explicitly states that you should not stress if you miss a workout, or if you end up indulging in a dinner out.
That's a really sharp departure from the hardcore militant adherence that's often pushed in fitness spaces. But mathematically and physiologically, it's the only sustainable approach to travel.
Because the stress of missing the workout does way more damage than actually missing it. The guide argues that the key is simply getting back to baseline with your very next meal or your next opportunity for movement. It heavily champions consistency over perfection.
Right. If you end up having a massive multi-course pasta dinner in Rome on a Tuesday, you haven't destroyed months of training.
You simply wake up on Wednesday, recognize the deviation, and initiate some form of movement. The forgiveness isn't a loophole to slack off. It's a built-in mechanism to prevent a total spiral.
If you demand perfection from an environment that is inherently unpredictable, like an international trip or a chaotic press tour, you will inevitably fail. Flights get delayed, time zones disrupt your circadian rhythm, client dinners run 3 hours long.
It's completely out of your control.
Exactly. Removing the pressure of executing a perfect, periodized workout opens the door to simply creating mechanical tension in the body every single day, in whatever small dose you can manage.
And that actually opens up a really interesting logistical question. If we're abandoning the perfect 1-hour session, what exactly is replacing it? Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the guide treats a standard hotel room like a functional playground.
A functional playground is a great way to put it.
I've been calling it the MacGyver workout. The creativity they suggest is super impressive. They outline highly effective hacks for when you are totally devoid of equipment. Taking the hotel stairs instead of the elevator for cardiovascular work. Utilizing a standard hotel desk chair to execute tricep dips.
The chair dip is a classic. It effectively isolates the triceps utilizing just your body weight and gravity.
But the guide pushes it even further. They suggest using the edge of the hotel bed for modified deadlifts or hip thrusts. And the recommendation that really caught my eye, utilizing your own packed luggage for back rows or overhead shoulder presses.
Luggage rows.
Yeah. Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Lifting a Samsonite suitcase filled with shoes and toiletries sounds like a fantastic way to develop an impinged shoulder. The weight distribution in a duffel bag is completely asymmetrical.
That is a very valid critique. Your musculoskeletal system doesn't necessarily know the difference between a meticulously engineered dumbbell and a 25-pound suitcase, because resistance is resistance. However, the stabilizing muscles certainly know the difference.
Right, because it's shifting around.
Precisely. The asymmetrical load of luggage forces your rotator cuff and core to work overtime to stabilize that awkward mass. If a listener is going to attempt a luggage overhead press, the adaptation required is to significantly slow down the tempo. You would use time under tension and isometric holds rather than explosive, dynamic reps to maintain joint safety.
That makes a lot of sense. Slow it down, control the eccentric phase. But the guide also wisely provides an off-ramp for those who don't want to hoist their carry-on over their head. They emphasize that you don't require an inventive, high-volume workout at all. You just need daily mechanical movement.
The source grounds its advice with a highly reliable standard set of bodyweight movements. It details a circuit of bodyweight squats, push-ups, planks, and jumping jacks.
Keep it simple.
Exactly. These require zero equipment, no awkward luggage wrangling, and can be executed in the narrow footprint between a hotel bed and the television console.
And for an audience that already trains regularly, that probably sounds incredibly basic. You aren't going to build massive quads doing air squats.
You aren't. But remember the earlier rule. The goal is maintenance. It takes significantly less volume and intensity to maintain existing muscle tissue than it does to accrue new tissue.
Just giving the body the signal.
Running through a 15-minute circuit of those basic movements creates enough mechanical tension and metabolic stress to signal the body to hold on to its muscle mass. Furthermore, it elevates the heart rate, forces blood into the tissues, and completely alters your physiological state for the day.
Speaking of altering your physical state, the guide makes a very specific recommendation that we both flagged during our read-through, a mandatory 10-minute morning stretch. And they aren't suggesting this just to feel limber. The text points out this is a necessary intervention to reset the body after enduring long flights or hours in a car.
If we look at the biomechanics of travel, you are essentially immobilized in a state of hip flexion for hours on end. Sitting in a cramped airplane seat physically shortens your psoas and hip flexors.
It's brutal on the lower back.
It leads to anterior pelvic tilt and essentially turns off your gluteal muscles. That 10-minute stretching protocol isn't a casual warm-up, it is a biomechanical reset. You have to restore length to those tissues and realign your pelvis before you start loading the body with movement or walking around a new city.
Which connects perfectly to their next point about how to explore your destination. The guide strongly advises skipping taxis or rideshares and opting to walk everywhere. From a training perspective, you are seamlessly integrating low-intensity, steady-state cardio, or LASS, into the actual purpose of your trip.
You're navigating from a museum to a cafe, but you are also accumulating time in Zone 2 cardio without having to consciously schedule it.
Exactly.
And LASS is the absolute optimal modality for a traveler. High-intensity interval training, while time-efficient, heavily taxes the central nervous system and spikes cortisol.
You're already stressed from the travel.
Right. When your body is already managing the systemic stress of travel, poor sleep, and a new environment, adding HIT to the mix is a recipe for overtraining and fatigue. Walking, however, burns energy, mobilizes fatty acids, and actually aids in parasympathetic recovery.
It is functional multitasking. Now, the guide does address those who want to pack slightly more than just a good pair of walking shoes. They provide a space-saving gear list that focuses entirely on high-yield, low-footprint items. The top recommendation is a set of resistance bands.
Essential.
The source highlights that they are light and effective, which is true. They take up less space in a bag than a rolled-up pair of socks.
The utility of resistance bands cannot be overstated for travel. Unlike free weights, which rely on gravity and have specific sticking points in their range of motion, bands provide linear variable resistance.
The tension changes.
Yes. As the band stretches, the tension increases. This provides an incredible muscle pump and safely maintains tissue elasticity without heavily loading the joints. They can replicate almost any cable machine movement you would perform in a commercial facility.
The guide also recommends a jump rope for immediate access to cardiovascular work, whether you're in a hotel parking lot or a courtyard. And finally, they suggest a mini foam roller or a dense massage ball, specifically for myofascial release. Taking a lacrosse ball to the arches of your feet after accumulating 20,000 steps on cobblestone streets is essentially mandatory recovery.
It reinforces the underlying philosophy of the guide. You are executing targeted maintenance and taking care of the body under the unique stresses of travel, rather than punishing it with grueling, destructive workouts.
That covers the physical movement and the gear, but we have to address the most complex variable of travel, nutrition. Being on the road can very quickly devolve into an excuse to eat hyper-palatable, highly processed foods for a week straight.
It happens very quickly.
The guide is incredibly pragmatic here. It acknowledges the reality of travel, but insists that it doesn't mean abandoning your nutritional baseline 24/7.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the guide introduces a framework that is the absolute cornerstone of sustainable metabolic health, whether you are in an airport or your own kitchen. It is the 80-20 rule.
Love the 80-20 rule.
The text explicitly defines this as a pro tip. Ensure you are eating well and hitting your nutritional targets 80% of the time, and purposefully enjoy treats without guilt for the other 20%.
Let's break down the math on that for a second, because I think people hear 80-20 and assume it just means they can eat whatever they want. If you are on a 5-day trip eating 3 meals a day, that is 15 meals total. 20% 15 is exactly 3 meals.
Right.
So the guide is essentially saying you have 3 opportunities to enjoy the local deep dish pizza or the incredible bakery near your hotel completely guilt-free, but the other 12 meals need to be fundamentally solid.
That is the exact mathematical application. It prevents the all-or-nothing cascade. To ensure you successfully navigate those 12 foundational meals, the source outlines 3 non-negotiable nutritional rules. First, it advises to put protein first.
Crucial.
The text specifically highlights options like grilled chicken, eggs, tuna, and Greek yogurt, noting their availability even in transit.
Which is critical because travel stress and disrupted sleep both induce a state of mild, acute insulin resistance. If you are exhausted and you eat a massive plate of carbohydrates, your blood sugar is going to completely spike and crash, leaving you incredibly lethargic. Prioritizing protein mitigates that glycemic response, keeps you satiated, and provides the amino acids necessary to preserve the muscle mass we discussed earlier.
It acts as a metabolic anchor. And this leads directly into the guide's second rule, snack smart. The source explicitly warns against relying on airport terminal snacks. An airport concourse is essentially a hostile environment designed to push overpriced, hyper-palatable, nutrient-void foods.
I always think of getting trapped in a layover in Atlanta. If you don't have a plan, you're going to end up eating a giant pretzel and a bag of candy simply out of boredom and proximity. The guide's solution is defensive preparation. It advises carrying your own fuel, nuts, high-quality protein bars, or whole fruit. You essentially control your nutritional environment by bringing the right choices into a bad ecosystem.
You are bypassing decision fatigue. When you are tired from a flight, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term planning and discipline, is heavily depleted. By having the almonds or the protein bar right there in your bag, you make the correct choice, the path of least resistance.
The third fundamental rule the guide outlines might actually be the most impactful for how you physically feel upon arrival. Stay hydrated. There's very prominent visual in the source material of a refillable water bottle, and the text stresses aiming for 2 to 3 liters of water daily. Now, 3 liters might sound aggressive to some, but consider the environment of a commercial aircraft.
It is entirely necessary. The ambient humidity in an airplane cabin is typically between 10 and 20%, which is significantly drier than most deserts. You are losing a massive amount of fluids simply through respiration.
Insensible water loss.
Precisely. And what happens when you become dehydrated? Blood plasma volume drops, the blood thickens, and your heart has to work harder to pump oxygen to your tissues. People frequently step off a transatlantic flight and assume they are suffering from profound jet lag or systemic fatigue, when in reality they are just severely dehydrated.
Just desperately in need of water.
Carrying a refillable bottle forces you to continuously source water, keeping cellular hydration optimized and flushing out the physical systems.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a significant amount of physiological and psychological ground today, extracting the functional wisdom from this Let's Roar protocol. Let's do a rapid recap, synthesizing the ultimate checklist so you can actually deploy this on your next deployment or vacation.
The tactical summary is highly actionable.
Here is the blueprint you need to remember. When packing, opt for light, high-yield gear like resistance bands and a jump rope. Plan for short, daily bodyweight circuits. 15 minutes of mechanical tension is enough to maintain your baseline. Use walking as your primary mode of transit to accumulate LISS cardio and manage travel stress. Aggressively defend your hydration with a refillable bottle, aiming for 3 liters. Apply the 80-20 rule to your nutrition, ensuring you prioritize protein to stabilize your blood sugar. Execute a daily 10-minute stretching protocol to correct the biomechanical damage of sitting, and above all else, focus entirely on consistency and maintenance, completely discarding the need for perfection.
This analysis raises a broader, highly compelling question that I want you to consider after we wrap up. The Let's Roar guide is explicitly designed as a framework for traveling, but consider the core methodologies. Abandoning the stress of constant progression in favor of consistent maintenance, utilizing 15-minute movement blocks when time poor, and utilizing the 80-20 nutritional rule to eliminate dietary guilt. If we applied this exact same flexible maintenance over perfection protocol to our daily, non-traveling lives during our most chaotic, high-stress weeks at home, how much more resilient would our baseline fitness actually become?
It's an incredible paradigm shift. We frequently allow a chaotic Tuesday at the office or a stressful week with the kids to completely derail our training using the exact same all-or-nothing logic that ruins our vacations. Treating a hyper-busy week at home with the grace and tactical flexibility of a travel day could completely eliminate the cycle of starting and stopping. It removes the cognitive friction entirely.
The physiological and psychological strategies required to survive the road are functionally the exact same strategies required to navigate a demanding life.
I couldn't agree more. Well, that wraps up our analysis of this highly tactical protocol. We hope you feel equipped, informed, and ready to tackle whatever trip or just overwhelmingly busy week you have on the horizon. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and in the meantime, let's roar.